Thanks everybody for joining today, and thanks Brooks. So I'm going to be talking a little bit more specific to Massachusetts, and in particular the MassSAVE programs. And I've got to say, I don't work for MassSAVE, I work for MassCEC. I may not be the most up to date on things in their programs, and I think many of you know they've just rewritten their 3-year plan, and between now and the end of the year, there's a lot of potentially much more generous things that could happen in this space. And I encourage you all to watch that and be involved with that discussion. So just stepping back on overall climate and Massachusetts climate challenge, right? We now have a law, a statewide law that requires us to get to net zero emissions by 2050. Everybody has to be on board with that. MassSAVE, the DPU, all the state programs. And that's really fantastic. But we know in our greenhouse gases in the state that transportation is the biggest slice of the pie. But once you get past that first slice, the next biggest category is buildings. And I would say that is especially existing buildings are going to be the toughest nut to crack. And so you're going to see a lot of hopefully innovative things in the next couple of years to try and figure out how we're going to scale up some of this retrofit work. And that will affect a lot of the people who live in housing that is sort of substandard and needs a lot of work. So first, just for the big picture, let's assume other people are working on getting the electric grid to 100% renewables, and they've done that, okay? What's left that we have to deal with in buildings? So 27% of Massachusetts emissions are from building on-site fuel, fossil fuels that are burned. So that means heating systems, hot water. We know that about 80% of the buildings that exist today in Massachusetts are going to still be here in 2050. So that means we have to do a really good job on those shell retrofits and improve efficiency by probably around 30%, maybe a little more on average, and get the fossil fuels out of heating and hot water. That's a big challenge. That means 2 million buildings we're going to have to address. Probably means electrical upgrades for a lot of them. It's going to be putting in heat pumps. It's a lot of things that we're going to have to do. And then, of course, we all know there'll be new buildings built between now and 2050. And it's really critical that those be built to ultra efficient standards with as little fossil fuels as possible in them. And I am not advancing. There we go, just a delay. So before I get into like the programs MassSAVE has for income qualified residents, first I just want to point out this energy burden, disproportionate energy burden that a lot of people face. There are programs out there that can help with just the money part of it. And I would say, looking at the numbers of people who participate in both the discount electric rate and the fuel assistance program statewide, based on what I see for incomes, I'm guessing at least a third of qualified households in the state are eligible for this and don't sign up. And that's pre-COVID numbers, right? A lot of people lost jobs and their incomes would have dropped into these ranges during that period as well. So it's important for all of us to know that these exist, to make sure to spread the word that they exist and let people know sort of how they access them. So the discount electric rate, which I think all the MLPs as well as the MassSAVE utilities do offer this. A lot of them call it the R2 rate. So if you ever hear that term, that's what that means. And it will give about it depends from which utility, but around a 25% discount on the actual electrons that come to the house that you pay for. There's also what people usually call fuel assistance, right? So the R2 rate is super easy to sign up for, by the way. There's a million ways that you can qualify and show, like if you have a child that's at reduced lunch, all these other kinds of programs, all you have to do is it's like an online, you just attach it, it's pretty easy. So always encourage people to look at that list of documents, see if they're on that list and that they can easily get that, because that's just a sure thing. The fuel assistance is a little tougher. Every year you have to go in and demonstrate in person at a CAP agency your income. And there's a lot of different paperwork you have to show. And of course, like we're with MAPC today, but way out west, that can be really a challenge. It might be a 45-minute drive, right? And if you don't have all the paperwork exactly right, you might have to make multiple trips. And so generally, if encourage people who are thinking of signing up for this to look at the list of documents they might need to bring and make sure they have everything before they go, because you don't want them going back and forth a bunch of times. So getting more to the efficiency side of things. We're lucky because MassCEC is actually pretty good in the 1 to 4 family program, I would say, for the income qualified homeowners. And this is true for renters as well. So say it's a 4-unit building and at least 2 of the tenants have either R2 or that fuel assistance, that whole building will qualify for these incentives that I'm talking about. So make sure owners who may or may not themselves be low income know that, right? And this is for any kind of fuel type, oil, propane, natural gas, electric that I'm talking about right now within the MassSave communities. And I think we had in the chat some discussion about MLPs who can choose to join this program, often don't, and they might have their own programs, but I'm mainly just talking about the MassSave communities. So in all cases, either a tenant or an owner can initiate a no-cost energy assessment. And someone will come out for free, an assessor, take a look and see what they think can be done on envelope measures within this program and what's considered to be cost effective. And they deal with those auditors. You don't have to like look through a whole bunch of options. You just have to ask for them and they'll come in. And just so people know, this list of sort of what income does change every year, gets updated every year. I only have 4 household to 4 because I think it's too hard. Otherwise, people's brains don't latch onto any number. But for a 4-person household, which I think is fairly common in Massachusetts, that's around $75,000 right now. So I mentioned this energy assessment. They do have the ability to do blower doors, even though the market rate program does not do that. I would say they are better on air sealing than the market rate program is. This is all great. The day they come in, they can give you lighting, bulbs basically, thermostats, power strips, and water saving devices. They're also going to take a look at the appliances. So those more, Jamal was talking about the cosmetic stuff, but a fridge is actually, if you can get a new fridge, that could be a real game changer because that can be a big piece of the electric load. So they're going to take a look at the age of that. If it's old enough, they can replace that for free. They'll look at other stuff as well. And then if there's stuff related to insulation and air sealing, they're going to make an appointment to come back. So if you're a renter and you've asked for this, you still need to get permission from the landlord, right? You just can't do things like that on your own, but the tenant can initiate that, and it can be more than just you asking your landlord. The CAP agency will reach out to the owner as well. And so it's very typical that there's wall insulation that can be added. Cellulose is what they cover, attic insulation. And like I said, I think they're generally much better on air sealing, which is a much more important part of the equation than most people realize. And as I put in the chat, they do have some resources for dealing with some of these pre-weatherization barriers that Catherine was talking about. I don't think they can deal with lead abatement at all, but some of these other things they can deal with. And there is also that DOER program, but usually in the 1 to 4 family program, they'll coordinate it all themselves. So it is somewhat, in that realm that it's all like one package. Heat pumps. So this is a fairly new offering, I would say. So for electrically heated buildings, they've been able for 3 or 4 years to cover conversion to heat pumps because that's the highest cost heating method right now in the state. And just really in the last year, they've been starting to oil heated and propane heated low-income households, they can switch. That's a new offering. And I think they're going to be expanding a little bit into the gas conversion area in this 3-year plan. It's sort of what I've heard hinted at. I do think people should be aware, though, that sometimes doesn't mean cost savings for the owner. Right now, we are one of the states where there's the biggest gap between gas prices and electric prices. So switching over from gas, just because it's so cheap, even though the heat pumps are way more efficient, it may not mean overall you would save money. So I guess for low-income customers, I don't always recommend that. I think at some point we're going to have to get everybody there, but maybe we wait till there's a heating rate specifically for low-income heat pump heated homes. And so how do people access these programs? So like I said, your utility will have an online form for that discount electric rate. So people just have to Google low income electricity discount rate, and they'll find it for their and put their utility name in. But the fuel assistance and all of this efficiency kind of measures, the best starting point really is the CAP agency. So these are around the state. A lot of times they'll have other services as well, but almost all of them have an energy and efficiency realm. So if you just go to this masscap.org and put in the community, you're going to get the contact number for where to sign up. And like I said, you do have to go in person. So this is a case study of the old program. So unfortunately, I couldn't find a heat pump one. There's going to be heat pump ones like this. This was in particular an oil property. But it's a 2-story, 2-family, built in the 1900s, very common, right? 2 oil boilers. The CAP agency there is the Springfield Partners for Community Action. And so they put in the light bulbs, the fridge, all those kinds of things, replaced the boilers with more efficient boilers, and really worked on the air sealing. And so basically got almost $32,000 of free stuff, right? And it leads to an annual cost savings of about $2,500 for the overall building. And then one more program that's not really under the CAP agency realm, but I would say, since we're talking about 1 to 4 families, these bigger, anything that's multifamily, we're going to see a move towards electric vehicles in the state. And so anybody who owns a multifamily building should be aware that there's some pretty generous resources for getting electrical charging in the parking areas for any of these buildings. And this is certainly true for bigger multifamily buildings, which I know is being dealt with in a different series, but even a 4-family, 3, triple decker that has some parking area should look into these programs. So the most expensive cost is really bringing the electrical service to that parking lot, and the utilities, both National Grid and Eversource, have what they call make ready. So they'll pay for that investment. And then usually the owner of the property has to pay for the charger. However, with multi-unit, there are programs to help offset some of the costs of that charger as well. And usually those are things where somebody puts a credit card or a debit card in. And so sometimes you can also find charger companies that will put it in if they think it's going to be used enough, and especially if it's made public to the neighborhood. They'll get enough revenue from that they'll put it in for free. So those are things people should be aware of. And I think that's all I've got. So back to you, Brooks.